Okay. Take notes. You will not remember everything.
Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Shaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Vipise Sasanyavadi Paschachira Satarine. So, can somebody take the harmonium? Could you move over? Because if you sit there, I'm going to have a neck ache. And people who come late can sit there, but this, I think I'm kind of set to look in this direction. So you can come over here is better. So I think the official title is The Roles of Men and Women. And the roles of men and women have changed a little bit. The nature of men and women has not changed, but the social conditioning has changed. The social environments have changed. So although fundamentally men and women are men and women, socially they've been conditioned differently, and then it affects our ability to fill traditional roles to some degree. So the principle that Prabhupada followed was that the goal of any effort is to be Krishna conscious. And ultimately, Prabhupada's service to us was to give us the path back to Krishna. And that was his goal. He wanted to get every one of us out of the material world back to Krishna. And so everything we do is meant to lead to that goal. Whether it's marriage, or being single, or being a sannyasi, doing business, working, retiring, whatever. The point is that in the end we will become Krishna conscious and go back to Godhead. So we want to look at Grihastha ashram in that light. And the problem that often happens is we may look at things in terms of details, of this is what should be done and what should not be done, and then we lose sight of what the goal is. And this is a big problem, and it's a common problem. We get more attached to doing things right than to being successful. So like we may do everything right according to the book, but not get the result. In this case, we could have a bad marriage, although we did everything right according to the book. And part of the problem is we didn't understand what was right according to the book. We didn't know how to practically apply it or understand a broader context. We're just maybe looking at it in a narrow way. We think, this is my duty, this is her duty. But things are dynamic and things are not that black and white. And that's where we would make our first mistake. So we want to keep in mind that the goal of Grihastha ashram is to be Krishna conscious. And Prabhupada sometimes would make adjustments in his instructions to Grihasthas based on who they were in the situation, because every couple is different. So when you give general instruction, it doesn't apply to the differences of each individual. Your particular background and conditioning, your husband's, the dynamics between you. And then sometimes you try to stick to very specific role models and it doesn't work because you're different. So there has to be adjustment. So the overriding principle is what's best for Krishna consciousness. And dare I say that maybe sometimes not doing something that traditionally we should do might be the best in a particular situation. And so we have to look at it that way. Otherwise we could make some big mistakes and we can do all the right things and then the marriage doesn't go well. The nice thing about what we're going to talk about today is that it applies to all relationships, not just marriage. There's specific dynamics between husband and wife, but the basic principles work in all relationships. So if you're not married or not planning to get married, you can apply these in all your situations, and also within the workforce. If you're dealing with women, if you're a man, you'll understand something a little more about women that would help you understand why they respond in certain ways, favorably or unfavorably. And if you're going to be married, then you're in a better position than those who are already married, because you can start off on a really good foot learning this. Usually those who are married have already made some mistakes out of ignorance. But the more you know before you go in, the more you can not get lost, so to speak. So we have about 2 hours, 2.5 hours. And normally when I do this workshop, we have 2 days. So it's caused me to think that I should hit what I believe are extremely important things to understand. And this is not necessarily from the Vedas. It's from the modern world. And why I would defer to this is because a lot of what we study in our books leaves a lot of space open for details that aren't there. And most of us don't put the details in. We just see a principle and think we kind of understand it when we read it. But in the practical world, there's so many nuances. We were talking this morning in class about the 6 loving exchanges. And if that's all it took to create a good relationship, relationships would not be complicated and everyone would have a good relationship, because all you have to do is feed someone, give them gifts, and talk to them about how you feel and listen to them. And if it were that easy, we'd have all great relationships. But there's so many things in between that are added to it. And so what I thought would be helpful is to begin by discussing some of the research that's available. And so it lets us know what has worked in relationships and what hasn't. And if you were all 65 years old and this was India, I probably would adjust it a little bit, but you're all young and you're in America, and knowing that you grew up in the last 20 or 30 years, you've grown up in an India that's very westernized. So I think this is 100% applicable. So I didn't want to go with, I don't know how to say this, just the strict Vedic traditional, because it requires, there's so much that you need to know when you're married. It's so complicated. And just a fuzzy idea of the man is the guru and the wife should be submissive has failed miserably, basically, due to lack of qualified men and lack of qualified wives. They can't be submissive to a man who's not qualified. And you don't find so many qualified men as you did 100 years ago. And what we also have found in the world today, what we've also found is that men take advantage of this idea that I'm the guru and you should do whatever I say. And women should be protected, and they misuse it and exploit them. So there has to be a lot to fill in within that traditional system, because it's difficult to perfect, it's been misused, and a lot of people who tried to use it who weren't capable of using it, it didn't work. If I tell my wife, here's the ideal, you should do whatever I say, is that possible? It's not possible. She wasn't raised that way. And if that's my standard, I'll always be upset with her, because she can't do it. If I understand her capabilities and limitations, and she understands mine, and she says, yeah, you should be a guru to me, and you should be a pure devotee, and so on and so forth. And then she has to understand that, well, we got married when we were 22, and I'm not there yet. I'm not. So she has to be tolerant of me. We have to make some adjustments, right? So these are like standards, like prototypes. And so generally, yes, the man should be the guru. Generally, yes, the woman should be submissive. But there's varying degrees of that. So much varying degrees that in certain cases, Prabhupada told the man to lead the wife, the wife to lead the man, because she was more Krishna conscious. So Prabhupada was willing to completely turn the system around in specific situations, not in general, but there were situations in which the wife was more Krishna conscious, and the dynamics were more suited to her leading. So I think it's important to not get hung up too much on traditional roles when you're either incapable or there's a balance. The woman's more Krishna conscious and the man's supposed to lead, and she's trying to respect him, but she's up in the morning chanting her rounds and he's sleeping, and he was up late at night playing video games. How is she going to respect that? And by nature, he respects her more because she doesn't do that. But I thought men are more spiritually advanced. I thought women are less into all these things. Then you get caught up in concepts that don't play out in reality. No, but your wife's smarter than you. She became a devotee before you did. But I thought women are more emotional and men are more controlled. Well, she's up in the morning and you're not. So you can't just read Shastra and say this is how it is, and then see something that's completely different and make believe you're seeing what it says in Shastra when you're not. That's where people get into trouble. Does that make sense? Yeah. And then the other place you get into trouble is if you see too much that way, your practical intelligence just gets clouded, because you can say, well, practically it would work better this way. No, but the scripture says this, and we have this story, and my Guru Maharaj said this. But in this situation, it just doesn't work. And then you try to make it work, but It doesn't. If it does, yeah, that's what you opt for. This is, it's like we were talking the other day. In Vedic times, girls, not in Vedic times, we're talking like 100 years ago, girls were married at the age of between 8 and 11, and then around 13, they moved into their husband's home, and then by 14, they have their first kid, and they didn't go to university, and basically they learned how to read and write and cook, and how to be a wife. And once they knew that, they were ready to marry. And if you think about it, it's a great system because that kind of ends the problem with abortion and so on. And it ends, so many problems. But can you do it today? You take an 8-year-old girl and say, this is your husband. At the age of 13, you're going to move in his home. Well, it would be illegal. So, you have these problems in transitioning culture. So you have to take principles and apply them practically. And those who get too caught up in this is how it should be, when now we're so different and social structure is so different, it won't work. So you have to make adjustments. So yeah, it's a good principle. The parents help find a husband, the right husband, when she's ready, when she wants to. In that culture, she already expected by 11 she'd be married. If by 13 she wasn't, there's a crisis, right? The whole village was in crisis now. She's 13 and not married. And so the whole village would be helping. It's a different system, different culture. So we're getting a lot of cultural paradigms that are so different than the paradigm we live in, and we have to make adjustments. And the way you make adjustments is to understand what's the point of it, what's the purpose. What's the purpose of marrying a girl young? Well, it was chastity. It was one husband, right? And then you have this other problem, which I think is extremely significant. We've gone from the extended family to the nuclear family. So if you study men and women, you'll see that women generally are more, I was just reading this morning, I'll give you an example. They'll say, if girls are playing and one girl gets hurt, they'll stop playing and take care of her. If boys are playing and one guy gets hurt, they'll just keep playing. This is a different mentality. I mean, I can't say in every case it would be that way, but that's a generalization. When one boy's hurt, he rolls down the hill, hurts, are you okay? Okay, yeah, and they just kind of ask if he's okay, and they don't really care, and then they go play. So maybe that's an extreme, maybe it's an exaggeration of sorts, but it's a generalization that girls would be more concerned. It's their nature. It's their nature. They play differently, they're made differently. But now and they're a little more relationally oriented. They like to express themselves more, how they feel. Men tend to not want to express how they feel. Men tend to want to go out in the world and conquer. That's important for them. Even though women may be career oriented, most of them are not so much in the conquering mode as men are. So there are differences, but one big difference is in certain needs that women have for relationship, to be heard, to be supported emotionally. For many men, it's a challenge. You can put it here, but for many men, it doesn't come natural. Like the wife says, I want to talk, and I'm feeling this way, and I'm feeling that way, and he's like. For many men, it's like, why do you feel that way? You shouldn't feel that way. But if a woman's listening, it's like, oh, that's really bad. I feel so sorry. It's not that men are bad and women are better. It's just they're constructed differently. So, as you know, the nuclear family, you had cousins, sisters, uncles, aunts, mothers, fathers, mother-in-laws, father-in-laws, grandparents. Everybody was not under one roof. Now it's under different roofs in the same building. But they're all together. But traditionally they were pretty close. So if a woman wanted to talk, she had so many sisters, aunts, mother-in-laws, like that, So it made it so, there was such less pressure on the men to be that kind of support. But when it's just one woman and one man in a house, and maybe a couple of kids, all of a sudden the man has to, this is just my analysis, I can't say this for sure, but pretty much it seems this way, that men have to learn skills that they didn't have to learn skills that don't come naturally. Some men are more, do listen better, but in general, men have to learn some skills to satisfy their wives that they don't naturally have because there's not everyone else around. So you have a problem, you just, go to your aunt and you talk to her and she listens. And now, so you're satisfied. So when your husband comes home, you don't have to tell it to him. And he's probably not the best person to listen anyway because he's just home from work and he just wants to sit on the couch and stare at the wall. He doesn't want to, he doesn't want to hear. He doesn't, he heard enough stuff. He's coming, I mean, good husbands will, but specifically many husbands will have to learn how to do that. So we have this challenge, and you might say your husband is this or that or not this or that, but he probably would have been fine 100 years ago not being this or that because you had everyone else to be this or that. And so it's a challenge for the women because they'll find generally men are lacking in that department of emotional support. And no offense to Indian men, but your culture is, it's, what's the word? I want to say masochistic. It's not masochistic. It's more macho, it's more male. So, in India, maybe with the younger Indians it's different, but in India, the last workshop I did, there were a lot of older men, and I said, how many of the men wash the dishes? And it was 0. Maybe 1. There were like 50 there. No, not 50, 50 total, so half men.
I wash daily.
Yeah. He's not a real Indian. See, he's in America. This is not fair, you're in America. Then I went to Mexico and I said, how many men wash the dishes? And every man raised their hand. So there are cultural differences. And you may have a cultural background that doesn't fit into the modern context. What do you mean you don't wash dishes? Your wife's working, you're working. Traditionally she did all the housework. Why? Because you were working and she wasn't. So it's the obvious difference, right? So these are adjustments we're making. Social structure is different. So it puts a lot of pressure on men. They can't always be in the traditional role because their wives are doing the same thing they do all day, and their wives got the same education. They were treated the same. And you guys were never taught communication skills or relationship skills. You just know how you relate to guys. And, guys talk, you can say, oh, that's the stupidest thing I ever heard, and punch him, and he'll just laugh. You can't do that with a woman. She'll cry and, divorce you, So, the way we deal with one another works for us as men. But, you can be sarcastic with your friends and joke like it. You can't be with your wife. It doesn't work. And so many of these skills, if we lived in an extended family, we could just do that with our cousins and brothers, and the women could do it with their sisters and cousins. So we have to learn some new skills because things are different. So my wife and I did a workshop by a man named John Gottman, and he had spent 40 years studying couples to try to understand what made couples successful. And he called the successful couples the masters, and the ones who weren't successful, he called the disasters. So what makes the masters successful? What caused the disasters to destroy their marriage or have bad marriages? And he put couples in a laboratory situation. In other words, he put them in a situation with cameras, and he was able to test their heartbeat, their blood pressure, the sweating of their hands, and he put them, and he would say, talk about something that's difficult. And he would see how they would talk about it. And with 94% accuracy, he could predict within 15 minutes of watching them what marriage was going to make it and what marriage wasn't. Of course, they could change their paradigm and then make it, but by the paradigms they were using, 94% accuracy. So he over studying all these couples, he saw there were patterns. If couples do this, it's not going to work. And if couples do this, it will work. So that's important to know, don't you think? And just as a clarification, working doesn't mean you stay together. Normally we would think, oh, it works, we're together. No, but you can be together in a completely dysfunctional relationship. So don't ever think that's successful. It's only successful that you stay together, but you say we're doing it for the kids. If you have a dysfunctional relationship, you're messing the kids up. So we think we stay together for the kids. No, you just messed them up by staying together because they saw this dysfunctional relationship. And it's statistically speaking, many kids have problems when they grow up in a family where the parents don't get along. So, if you're fighting or they see the mother and father never talk, so what does that teach them? So then they become adults and they do the same thing. They either fight with their spouse, they don't talk, So it's common, we're staying together for the kids. Yeah, stay together in a good relationship. That'll help the kids. But just staying together, not necessarily is helping the kids. But so I just wanted to define a good relationship doesn't necessarily mean you've stayed together. You could have a very bad relationship and stay together. You could never talk with one another. You could do nothing together. You could have no interest in one another, but you're staying together out of duty. Of course, that's nice that you want to be dutiful and not just give up. But we need to do more. And so I don't know how much we're going to get through and how many questions you have, so I want to get through some of these things because it's just like this is statistics of 40 years. So this is super helpful. So he used an example of apocalypse. Apocalypse is a kind of destruction that's described in the Bible. And he described 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, and what he meant was there are 4 things that would destroy a marriage. And I will explain them. And one of them is guaranteed. When you do this, guaranteed, it cannot last. It's impossible. It's like poison in your food. You're going to get sick. Okay. The first one is criticism. Now, the way he explained this is very important. Because you might say, but what if there's a problem? How do I not express the problem? He said, yes, you express the problem, but you don't character assassinate the person, right? So let's say a woman wants her husband to help with the dishes, and he doesn't. So there's 2 ways of bringing it up. She could say, I've worked really hard, and you said you were going to do the dishes, and I'm really tired. And if you couldn't do the dishes, at least you could have told me, and I could have made some adjustment. That's one. You say, is it possible you could do it, or or can we just establish this for the future, so that you do it, 3 nights a week like you planned, or we need to discuss why you're not doing it. So it's not really criticism; it's just the discussion of a problem. A criticism would be, you didn't do the dishes because you're a lazy bum, and I'm sick and tired of seeing you. You're just sitting watching television. You could be, promise to wash the dishes. So now you're character assassinating, right? So that's the reason this is degrading, I think, is obvious. But what he found is that the marriages that were the most successful were the ones that had the most respect. So criticism obviously undermines respect, right? It's pretty much the opposite. So if you respect your spouse, you wouldn't deal with them that way. You wouldn't deal with anyone that you respect that way, right? Is that true? So when you get in trouble with these Vedic paradigms where I'm the husband, I'm right, you're the wife, you do what I say. That's not respectful. It's like, how do you feel? I think we should do this. How do you feel? I'm right, I'm the husband, I'm the guru. There's a misunderstanding. Even Prabhupada didn't do that. He would say, what about this? Can you do this? What do you think? It was, one time a devotee came to Prabhupada and asked a question, and Prabhupada said something like, you want me to tell you what to do, or you want to discuss it? It was like asking, do you want, because he could see that what he was going to say would be hard for her. And so even him as a guru wasn't like that. Like, you just want me to tell you, or you want to tell me, or what? So respect is the basis of a relationship. And so when there's respect, you don't criticize people you respect. And criticism, as we're saying here, is character assassination. You're assassinating the person and you're not talking about the problem. Right? This is the problem. Separate the person and their character and behavior from the problem and try to resolve the problem. That's respectful. Now, obviously, none of us likes being criticized. Right? If a woman is criticized, a woman interprets it as the man doesn't love me. If a man is criticized, the man interprets as my wife doesn't respect me. And there's nothing more important than love for a woman and respect for a man. So criticism is like an acid that undermines the very thing that we thrive on, which for a woman is affection and for men is respect. So how can you expect to have a good relationship if you're undermining such a strong need in another person, right? It's just the way men are constituted. They need to be respected. And women are constituted. They need... Women, of course, men want to be loved, women want to be respected, but men want to be respected more than loved, and women want to be loved more than respected. It's just, generalization, but that's generally how we are. And so when there's respect and there's a situation you need to discuss, you don't in any way play with the love. So you want to do it in a loving way, or you want to do it to the men in a respectful way. Does that make sense? Because that's very important to maintain that respect. Especially for men, they need it. And women, if they will interpret lack of respect as lack of affection. So, you understand the difference between complaining about the situation? Like one time I came home late and I didn't call. So my wife said, I was worried about what happened to you. And I said, I forgot to call her. So I forget what the reason was. But she wasn't saying, you always do this, you're irresponsible. She was saying, I was worried. So these are called I statements, when you express how you feel about a situation. This is, when you came home, you didn't come home on time, I was worried, would it be okay if you call me, just because I worry about it? The other way of saying it is, you never come home on time, you're, what are you talking to girls in the office? You're just attacking, right? So that is destroying the relationship. There's a concept of what's called the emotional bank account. And the emotional bank account is positive actions, positive words are deposits. So it makes your relationship better. Negative words, negative actions are debits. You're taking out. The problem with this is every negative thing you do or say, you have to do 5 positive things to equal it out. So if you told your husband when he was late, you're just a lazy bum, you don't care about me, now you have to do 5 things to get to 0. For men, it doesn't matter how big what you do, it's just counted by 1. So if you bring 1 flower a day for 7 days, it's better than bringing 7 flowers on 1 day, because you get 7 points instead of 1 point. Even though it's 7 flowers, you just did it once. And you buy her a brand new BMW, you still only get 1 point, because it's just 1 act. So you need to know how they keep score. It's just, so you think, I buy the BMW, now I can do whatever I want for the next year. No, she's waiting tomorrow for another deposit in the bank. So that, maybe you get 5 points. So actually the biggest thing where you get more than 1 point is listening. If you listen and say, I understand, and that's really bad, then you get lots of points. But even for the BMW, or the Mercedes, you're only going to get 1 point, unfortunately. So maybe you want to bring the tire first, and then a picture of it the next day. So now, for a man, this won't make sense. But this is just how women operate. So then you have to deal with how they operate. It should make sense, but it doesn't, because they don't think like you do. So the goal, at least the way I look at marriage, one of the goals is to create as many positive interactions as possible. Because the more positive interactions, the more deposits, the better the marriage, the better relationship. The more negative interactions, the more withdrawals, the worse the relationship. And so when we say a marriage is bankrupt, literally it means that's when divorce happens, because there's nothing left in the account, because it's all been negative, and it's just whatever positive happened 2 years ago, you've negatived it out in the past 3 years, and so you've just drained the account and you have nothing left. So positive actions, positive words. Even in a negative situation, you have to make it positive. Like, can we talk about this? So you have a positive conversation about talking about something negative. You know, I'm really feeling this way and I'm really overworked, and can we talk about it? And there's another paradigm which is very important. It's the me versus we. So when the situation is us, we're talking about us, and it's no longer me against you, or me against my wife, or my wife against me. It's we have a problem. And so the problem that I have is our problem, because I'm doing this, and when the evening comes, I'm too tired or too distraught to do this and that. And this is our family, so it becomes your problem also. You don't say it this way, but it's not just my problem that I can't do this. It's our problem, because this is part of the house. It's not getting done. I can't do it. So can we discuss our problem? You know. So I found this to be extremely valuable, because it deflates conflicts, because you're on the same side and you're trying to solve the same problem, rather than fighting one another. Why didn't you do this? Or why didn't you tell me? And I always do this. And you know. No, here's the problem. It's over here. So we're looking at the problem together, trying to figure it out, rather than looking at one another and trying to blame one another why the problem is there. So in my personal life, whenever my wife had concerns, I always found it extremely helpful to let her know it's my concern also, that let's figure out how to do this. Even if the concern was that I wasn't doing something that she needed me to do, and say, okay, well, let's talk about how we can do it. You know, you're working too hard. Okay, let's talk about how I could work not so hard. Could you do this and that for me? Because that would reduce an hour a day. Could you help with this on Saturdays? That would really help. And if you did that for a while, I could get through this project, which is taking all this time. So then it's we. Otherwise, it sounds like I'm being attacked, and now I have to, like, I don't know how to stop working this hard, because these are necessary things. If I do, then we don't have money for the household. So now what do we do? So I can work less, but that means less money. Can you live on less money? It's our problem. So that's such an easy way to deal with problems, to make them our problems. Don't get defensive. Don't say I can't do it, and say, if you want, I can try, but this will be the result. What do you think we should do? And I found a lot of times when my wife wanted me to do something and there were financial consequences, she just said, oh, okay, I guess you can't. It was solved very quickly, because there's obvious financial needs you have to fulfill. So, or it may be some situation that's just like, if I don't do this or she doesn't do that, or I do this and she does that, it's not going to work. So we just immediately agree, oh, now I understand why you do this or why it doesn't work. And in other situations, yeah, I could do that differently. I never thought of it. I didn't know it bothered you. So now I know it bothers you. Yeah, I could do that. Sure. Or could you help me figure out how to do that? I have this and this and this to do at this time, but you want me here at this time. How are we going to do it? So this is very, very important. You get off the me and you get into the we. It's our problem. And that will avoid a lot of negative. So this is the goal, to avoid negative interaction as far as possible, and to maximize positive interaction. Then your bank is getting rich, and naturally the relationship is rich, because the bank is rich. And you will see in any good marriage an extreme degree of respect, even if someone disagrees with what their spouse says. They'll take it like, so They may say something you disagree with and say, oh yeah, I can understand, I don't agree, but I understand where you're coming from. You're not putting them, how could you believe that? That's so stupid. What's wrong with you? This is, I believe this and my wife believes this, and it's different. And I'm telling you what she believes, and you don't see that I'm upset at all. Just like I respect her, that's what she believes. That's okay. Some people think to have a good relationship, you have to agree on everything. You want to know the statistics? In every good marriage, every bad marriage, they disagree on about 2/3 to 3/4 of things. That's normal. To disagree on 2/3, I forget the figure, it's at least 2/3. I think it's 75%. To disagree is normal. Isn't that interesting? If you think we have to agree on everything to have a good marriage, you'll never have one, because you'll never find anyone that agrees. Right? So, how is it that couples who have good marriages disagree on most things? Because they know how to manage the relationship and not and it's like, okay, you disagree with your husband. That's fine. You don't have to agree on everything. You know how to manage that. If you make that a point of a make or break a marriage, your marriage will fail because you'll disagree on too many things. And again, that is depleting your emotional bank account. So you know how to manage. They found in research compatibility is not the key ingredient for a successful marriage. It's managing the relationship. Because compatible couples may not know how to manage a relationship. And we're all Vedic, it's got to be compatible. Well, talk to any Vedic astrologer and they'll tell you there are a lot of bad compatible marriages. And a lot of decent incompatible marriages. Because the compatible couples who have the bad marriages didn't manage their marriage properly. And the incompatible couples did. And so often say, why are you breaking up? We're not compatible. That means they don't know how to manage it. Most couples disagree on most things. Most couples with excellent relationships disagree on most things. That's called managing the relationship. Being respectful. And we'll learn some things how to manage a relationship. As you can understand, just by what we're talking about now, managing, it just means doing the opposite. The opposite of criticism. Respect, understanding, empathy, and so forth. Is there any questions on that? Okay, so here is the problem. When criticism is very prominent in relationship, it leads to the next one. And this is kind of like criticism on steroids. So if you don't curb the criticism, it's going to lead to the next one, and the next one is the single most predictor of a marriage that's going to fail. It's like pretty much guaranteed. If this pervades your marriage, it's not going to work. You want to hear what it is? Yes? I have your attention. The second one is contempt. And what contempt means, it takes criticism to another level and it puts you in a superior position. So now I'm minimizing you, putting you down. Like, you're stupid, you're an idiot, you don't know anything, you're lazy. Why aren't you smart like I am? Why aren't you active like I am? What's the matter with you? So I put myself above. And that pretty much eliminates all respect. When you condemn comes from a point of I'm better. So this is a problem for men who when they read scripture think, well, I'm supposed to be in a superior position and a woman in a subordinate position. And then misunderstanding or misusing that, they can come to this point of contempt. No, you're just supposed to do what I say, and you're not that smart anyway. And that's the danger of misunderstanding Shastra, because if you misunderstand Shastra, it kind of makes it sound like the man's always right and the woman's always wrong, but it doesn't say that. But you could be led to believe that. You're in a superior position, women inferior, they should just listen to you, and so your wife says something, you go, that's really stupid. Why would you say that? You have some concept that, Hare Krishna, you have some concept women are... You want to sit over here? Yeah. So, condemnation, these are some symptoms, so you can check yourself and see how you, well, let's go back to criticism. Like, well, how many of you are married? Raise your hand. Okay, the guys who aren't married, I don't know if you'll be able to score yourself. You'll have to try to imagine what you would be like in your present state of consciousness if you were married. And this could be difficult because it's hard to imagine until you're actually with that person in that dynamic. But give yourself a score on criticism. So 10 means you're really good at criticizing. You do it all the time, and 0 means it's like practically, it's non-existent. 1 means it's practically non-existent. Just give yourself a score in your head, or you can write it down. It's just for you, just as an evaluation of how you're doing in the criticism department. How often, what's the intensity of it?
You want to write everything?
No, just the number. Not that, I mean, you want to reflect on how you do it? Would that help you? You want to do that? Because we can do that. But we don't have that much time. So you can, okay, when you write your score, just reflect. I think the best reflection is ask yourself, why do you do it? Like, because, okay, here's the mantra. Behind every criticism is an unmet need. So what is that unmet need behind your criticism? And so give yourself a score and think, what am I not getting that I'm trying to get by criticizing? And the guys who aren't married, you can just do that in your ordinary life. If you ever criticize, then think, what need am I trying to fulfill by criticizing? And all of you out there, you can do it also. This is just for your own reflection. It's not an assignment you're going to hand in. We can discuss it, yes.
You say criticism, it just, sometimes a person has a nature. It's not just to husband, just to everyone. The other person sees everyone just like, just want to put them down.
Yeah.
So that's what...
So yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's just for your husband. That's true. Could be. Generally, it's a bit like that. It's just more, generally it's more intense at home than it is out in the world. So maybe we can have a little discussion now. Because maybe for some of you it was a little difficult to understand what need you're trying to fulfill. So, would someone want to share a need that they think they're trying to fulfill by criticizing? I think, yes.
I sometimes like to go by the rules and like to make things everything perfect according to what I feel and I've learned in my life.
Oh yeah, okay.
So sometimes if the thing is not according to that,
yeah.
So I'm like questioning a lot, which is, I know bad sometimes, but yeah.
Yeah. So it's that's a good point. You have a standard which you grew up with of what's right and what's wrong, and maybe his standard's different. So you want to enforce your standard on him. And when he doesn't follow that standard, then in your mind it's wrong or bad. His mind it's not wrong or bad because he maybe has another standard. And so then you criticize him. So yeah, so that's good. So now that you realize that, what I would suggest is that you two sit down together and you question him and say, what was it like in your house when you were raised? And, we have this standard. Was that a standard for you? And he might say, yeah, it was a standard, but I never followed it because I didn't think it was needed to be followed. I didn't like it or whatever. I thought it was stupid. Why did you think it was stupid? Because I saw that when we tried to follow it, if we didn't, my mother just got mad, and if we didn't have the standard, she wouldn't have got mad. And so you're starting to understand why he doesn't follow certain things. That would be better for you. That would make it easier for you. Having these kinds of conversations are very important. Like why, but maybe you buy things, and he thinks, why are you buying these things? And so he asks you, why? Why do you buy these things? You know, we just bought them 3 years ago. Why do we have to buy new ones? And you say, well, in my house every year we changed, you know, this, or we got new plates every 3 years, and new furniture and this. So then he understands, oh, it's not that we need it, it's just you grew up every 3 years seeing that, so you kind of think, oh, is that what you're supposed to do? So then he says, well, you don't have to do that, and we could save that money and we could, you know, use it for something else. So you're discussing it and understanding more about yourself and why you do things. And that could solve a lot. It's a very good point.
I do understand that he's on a very high, broader level of understanding, and he is like never questions anything, and so he's on a good level that everything is fine. I mean, even if we do something this way or that way, it's fine.
For him, yeah.
And then I understand that also. But as she mentioned, it's in my nature.
Yeah.
So
sometimes, and we don't have time for this, but in our workshops, I'll just ask the question, you can meditate on it later. The question is, what would it be like to be married to yourself? In other words, kind of like, what you incarnate in his body, and you say, but I keep my mind, my mentality, and then I'm married to me, what would that be like? And you start thinking, maybe I do things that actually aren't fair or unkind or something. And you get objectivity. So that would be a good thing to do, you know. Okay, so I am very particular about these rules. What would it be like to be married to a person, very particular about rules, if I wasn't like him? You think, oh, that would be hard. So you kind of empathize with him. And the idea is that if I'm going to be married to someone, I want to be the best person I can possibly be, the most reasonable person I can possibly be, the kindest, most objective, generous, etc. person I can be, to make my spouse's life better, easier, happier. And we generally enter marriage, or many of us enter marriage, thinking more about what we're going to get from our spouse than what we're going to be for our spouse. Now that's a fatal mistake. It's very self-centered. And two self-centered people will fight. You don't do this. No, well, you don't do that. And it should be the other way. You should be fighting about who can do more for one another. Oh, you serve me too much. I don't like it. Let me serve you. No, I want to serve you more. You know, ideally it should be like that. So this is just respect to the ultimate degree. Whatever hang-ups I have, whatever idiosyncrasies I have, whatever emotional or psychological problems I have, I want to resolve them. I want to heal so I can be the best person I can be for my husband. If I see a drop of water and I scream at him, that's unfair. You know, I don't want to be that kind of person, you know. What do they call those people? Like obsessive? OCD, yeah. Yeah, I don't want to be obsessive, or, you know, psychologists come up with all kinds of names for things. But you know, like intolerant, or, you know, it has to be this way. A little idea that can help you is what you expressed are rules which you follow, and you got those rules growing up, or somehow from your parents or somewhere. And those rules can be changed. Those rules are not absolute. Those are rules that you've adopted, but you subconsciously adopted them naturally because they were there, and to you they're normal. But they're actually just rules. And you can change those rules. So if your rule has to be like this, and this has to be here, and this has to be done at this time, you can change them. And so, you know, it has to be around here and around this time. Something like that. And if sometimes it doesn't happen, then it's okay. And so you can actually change them once you realize what your rules are. So you might want to write down your rules and start looking at which rules are bad for the relationship and saying, okay, what could I change this rule to? What would be another rule where I'd still be satisfied, but it would be better for him? To me, that's what respect looks like. when we talk about respect, you have to know what it looks like practically. So I'll give you an example. My nature is, I don't like to be told what to do. My father used to tell me, I can never tell you what to do because you don't listen. And I was just, yeah, that's just who I am. I don't listen that well to people, And it's just my nature. It's not like I'm an evil person. It's just my nature. And when I got I'm totally serious. This is not a joke. I was driving around the country for many years in my work. And once around here, I think I was in Norfolk, and I went north to get on the freeway that goes south because it was hard to get out of there. I don't know where it was, Norfolk or somewhere. At that point, I said, I'm going to buy a GPS. I never had one. I never needed one. I was like, oh, that's it. I just wasted like 3 hours, and it was like 9 o'clock at night, and I'm driving on these roads. So I got a GPS, and so there's a woman. The woman is like mother, telling me what to do, and I don't want my mother telling me. She goes, turn right at the next street, and I swear in my mind I said, don't tell me what to do. I didn't like it. It was like, I was like, I'm serious. Like it took getting used to. Totally. I was like, I'm not going to do what you tell me. So one time my wife told me or suggested that I should do something. It would be better if I did this or learned this or tried this. I forget what it was. And I got upset. But now I was much more self-aware at this point in my life. So I knew why I was getting upset, because I just react when people tell me. Maybe I'm better now than I was then. This happened maybe 10 years ago. And in about 3 minutes, I walked into the room and I said, I want to apologize for how I reacted, because it's just my nature when people tell me this is how I react. So she was like, very happy that I apologized. So in that way, I was trying to not be a problem for her because of how I am and working on myself. And I call that respect. I think that's like one of the highest degrees of respect. Because a lot of people go into relationships with lots of problems and traumas and weird idiosyncrasies and rules and so forth. And they're just like, no, these are the rules. That's it. You do what I say, And it's like, that's not fair. That's not respectful, right? So in all his study, respect was the main thing, and we're just learning how respect manifests. Respect was the main thing, and you can see that. How could there be love if there's no respect? And if I'm criticizing, or I'm being criticized, it sends a message. My wife or my husband is like, they don't really care how I feel, or they just care about being in charge, being the boss. So what kind of relationship is that? And so then the other spouse just tolerates it, and it just removes affection. So you're like together and trying to do things, but each one of those withdrawals, your affection it gets less and less and less. And then when affection gets like so far, or maybe this way, or the frequency of affection gets so little, there's no relationship anymore. And so you have no desire to do anything with that person. And when you have a relationship, you have to do things together. That's how the relationship builds. You stop doing things together, the relationship it gradually just dissolves naturally. A lot of times you will find you will have problems in your relationship for no other reason than you're just not spending enough time together. And your wife's upset, or you don't feel a connection, right? I was just reading something. It's very interesting. They say, my husband cheated on me, or my wife cheated on me, and it ruined the relationship. And said, no, the relationship was already bad. That's why they cheated on you. It was the effect. It's not causing the bad relationship. It was the effect of a bad relationship. So if you're disrespectful to your husband, and he goes to work, and his secretary is respectful, and saying nice things, you're in trouble, right? So I predict robots are going to become the new wives and husbands because they'll be respectful.
Yeah, I read that news.
Yeah, it seems like a logical conclusion. So you come home late and the robot greets you and says, "Oh, I'm so glad to see you." You know, they're not like, "Why'd you come home late? You know, you promised." You know, like, yeah, Alexa. But you know, a real robot, like a beautiful woman. And, you know, yeah, you think it's weird? It's going to happen. I've been studying it a little bit. It's scary, but you know, imagine, you know, what kind of spouse do you think your husband wants? Or what kind of spouse do you think your wife wants? And try to be that. That's respect. And if you have issues, deal with it. If you've got anger issues or issues of criticism or sarcasm or emotional immaturity or whatever it is, work on it out of respect to your spouse so they don't have to live with a crazy, weird, dysfunctional person. That makes sense, right? Are some of us crazy, dysfunctional, weird? Yeah, we all are, to some degree or another. It's just the way we are, right? We're all different, and it may not suit your spouse exactly, you know. I like everything clean, everything in its place, and everything on time. We say 6 o'clock, I leave at 6, whether you're in the car or not. It's just that, you know, okay, that's good. That's a good quality. You're on time. It's not good for a relationship. It's good for business, you know. You know, okay, you don't come to the board meeting on time, we're locking the doors. You just, you know, you're going to learn to come on time. That's all right, you know. You don't have to go home with all those people. But when you live with them, you can't do that. Does that make sense? Yeah. So why else would we criticize someone? Someone want to suggest something? It doesn't have to be your own realization. It could be an observation.
Not on time.
Because you have, so I think it's the same thing as her. You have a rule. Everything should be on time. And it's kind of also a justice thing. You know, this is what's right. And so being late is wrong, and you're wrong. And then you can interpret it in so many ways. You can interpret it as disrespect. They don't care for your authority, etc. They don't care for your time, yeah. But it could be any rule, not on time, but anything. You know, people who have a high need for justice are going to have trouble in relationships. Because,
Short temper.
Yeah, short temper because? Because you want people to be the way, because you want them to follow the rules. So it's a consequence of the rules. Yeah, these are the rules. If you don't follow, then so that probably means you have a high need for justice. And then it's difficult. Yeah, that's something to work on. Or join the military, or something. You know, become a judge or something. You know, that suits it. But like a lot of these qualities are really good in the business place. You know, like having rules, and you know, this company runs really smooth because we all follow the rules. But in relationships, it may not work. You know. So that's something to consider, yes. Thank you. What else?
Out of envy also, because you are jealous of some other person and you want to prove yourself the best.
Yeah. Yeah. You want to bring them down. It could happen in a marriage where the other person you perceive the other person as more qualified, smarter, more capable, and it makes you feel less qualified, less intelligent, less capable. And you may try to criticize them to even things out a little bit so you feel better. If I can bring you down, I feel better. Because I feel bad when you're up here because it makes, you know, I didn't go down anywhere, just perceptually I'm lower, but I'm in the same place I always was. So if I can bring you down, then I feel better. Yeah, it should be just the opposite. I mean, actually, you could never go up by bringing someone down, but you can go up by bringing someone up. And there's you know the concept of win-win and win-lose, you know. So I think somebody's got to win, either me or him, you know. No, but if I can help him win, I win also. I go up when I bring him up. I go down when I bring him down. So it's a misunderstanding of really the way the world works.
criticize out of caring.
Criticizing out of caring, yeah. Okay, so then, that's a very good point. Then it's just a matter of how you express it, so it doesn't come out as criticism. So it comes out as, if you care for your husband, then your words have to demonstrate that care. If your words demonstrate something else, he's not going to see it as caring, and it's not going to communicate. Even though you might say, well, it's obvious what he's doing is wrong, he should understand, but it may not communicate. And so, if it's not communicating, the best thing is not to think there's something wrong with the person I'm communicating to, but it's better to think there's something wrong with the way I'm communicating. You know, like once I taught a class and a devotee said, was the class good? And I said, yeah, I taught everything on my curriculum. And they said, did the students learn everything? I said, that's how you know if the class is good. Not because what you taught was good or you think it was good. It's good because the students understood it. That's how you identify a successful class, right? Not I made a fantastic presentation. Did anybody learn anything? I don't know. They should have. If they didn't, it's their fault. No, it's your fault if they didn't. So if you can think that way in terms of communication, that even though I communicated it, if it didn't communicate, that means the person, they're of a certain nature where that kind of communication doesn't work. Now your communication may work for him, but it may not work for her. So when you're dealing with her, you have to adjust it. Rather than say, well, it's too bad for her, or she has to adjust. No, you adjust. So if you're not getting the result you want, then you have to change. So criticism as a problem-solving method done well, it's not really criticism, it's discussion. So, the techniques, the methods have to be re-examined. What did you say the problem was? That they don't care, you do it out of care. So it just has to be, aligned. Your caring has to be aligned with the way you present it. And if you present it like you're a general in the army, it's not going to look like caring. But I think sometimes women will criticize because their husbands don't listen to them and they get frustrated. And after I asked you so many times, you didn't do it. So then, here's another thing. This is a beautiful thought. So let's say, it doesn't have to be male-female, but I'll just use this as an example, that the woman's criticizing the man because he's not listening. And she gets frustrated. I said, you told me so many times you're going to do this, like what's wrong with you? You're like not honest. Are you lying to me? Or come on, you said you do this, you didn't do it. So if the man is smart, he'll think, my wife is getting upset because I'm not listening. And if I had listened, she wouldn't be upset because I would have done this. So you can affect her emotional state by the way you react to what she says. And so rather than blame her, why are you getting so upset? You're always upset. She's getting upset because it's the 6th time she asked you to do something, you didn't do it. So it's actually your fault. So it's good to ask that question. Is she getting upset because of something I did, or is she just getting upset? And if she's just getting upset because she had a bad day, then you try to pacify her. But she's getting upset because of something you did that you want to do something about that so you don't continue doing it. Right? Maybe a more clear example. You want your wife to respect you. So how do you get someone to respect you? Well, you act in a way which makes it easy to respect you. So you come home from work, you slouch on the couch, turn on the news, eat potato chips, and she's talking to you, and you just turn her off. And she's going to have a hard time respecting that. You think, well, you're trying to practice Krishna consciousness. You're like living like a slob on the couch, watching some stupid thing about Trump and impeachment and this and that. And why don't you take a shower, put on a dhoti and tilak, and read Bhagavatam? Then I would respect you. So, and you're saying, you should respect me, I'm your husband. And in her mind's she's thinking, yeah, well, do something to respect, and I will. So you should be aware of that. If you want someone to respect you and they're having a difficult time respecting you, it could be their fault, but it could also be your fault. So why make it hard for them to respect you? No, it's the wife of the duty to respect the husband. Okay, that's fine. But to respect the husband, that's not respectable? That's not what the Shastra says. Shastra says, if he's not respectable, she shouldn't respect him. So sometimes if your wife doesn't respect you, you should think, I deserve it, because I'm not acting in a respectful way. A way that commands respect. Now, what's a woman to do if her husband acts in a way that doesn't command respect and she knows he needs to be respected? And that's the challenge for the woman. Because the woman can't say, I will never respect you until you act on this standard. You know, it's still her duty to respect. I'm only speaking to the men, saying you're making it harder. Make it easier for her to respect. Right? You know what women respect? It's so funny because I'm so bad at fixing things. So I'm so bad at fixing things. I love when something goes wrong in the house so I can try to fix it and go up to my wife and go, I just fixed it. She's like, oh, yes. She loves that, you know, because, you know, there's certain things that are typically male that women like. So, you know, if I can fix something, my wife's like, you're the best. So I make it easier for her to respect me. You know, aside from other things, you know, practical things, like I can, you know, even taking the trash out or washing the dishes, you get so many bonus points. It's respectable activity. Yeah. Someone had their hand raised? Yeah.
So, like you said, Ruchi, like, you know, if the situation that, you know, the husband comes and then he's doing this and that, and then or something, you know, that we don't like and we want the person to do something else. So, but sometimes we just think on the other side that, you know, he's been whole day tired. And,
Yeah.
you know, it's okay, just for 15 minutes, 10 minutes, it's okay to do all
Yeah,
this.
yeah, of course.
And on the other hand, if it keeps on repeat, you know, it's if it's a part of the revision, how to express that thing?
Yeah. One of the things that I would suggest is that you and your husband, this is for everyone, meet at least once a week just to talk about stuff. Because when you talk about it in the moment, there's more emotion. When you talk about it in general, you know, it's like, and you could just reveal your mind. You could say, you know, when I see you doing that, it's like, this is how I think, you know, so it's like, I don't want to think that way. And could you just explain to me, like, why you do that, or do you need to do that? And he might say, yeah, when I come back from work, I just need 15 minutes of nothing time, just to like, then I'm okay. So if you just let me do that, it helps me just relieve the stress. And it's actual fact that women relieve distress by talking, men relieve distress by doing nothing. Just hanging, not doing anything. So a man, it doesn't make sense. A man is like, why would you talk about a problem? You know, it just makes it worse. You know, no. Women say, no, it lets me get it out. And he's like, boy, that doesn't make sense to me. And they don't want to think about the problem and talk about it, and it just goes away. It doesn't make sense to you. So it doesn't have to make sense to you, other than if it works for them, you respect it. So you say, you know, so here you might say, well, you know, if you just give me like 20 minutes when I come home, is that okay? And then after that, I'll be there. They're like, okay, now I understand, you know. I'll just go in my room for 20 minutes and whatever, you know. Zone out, or, you know, find out how the impeachment's going, or, you know, who won the football game, and then I'll be fine. Something like that. Or I just have to, you know, whatever it is, I just have to check, you know, this time of day I have to check my emails or something, you know, to make sure there's nothing hanging over from the office. And so once you understand it, and then you could say, but let's say you didn't like it. You could say, but, you know, when you do that, then the kids, you know, they want to see you and you're like zoning out, and then they're upset and they come to me. So could you zone out like in the car before you come in or something? So you work it out. And he goes, yeah, that's an idea. I'll just zone in the car.
That's what I said.
There's this guy who teaches about marriage, and he said, for a woman, everything in her mind is connected. The wires go everywhere. He said, but for a man, they have a box. You have different parts of your brain, and they have a box with nothing in it. And that they go to the nothing place, and that's where they just chill out, and they go to that nothing part of their brain. They're just like, and the woman's like, how can you do nothing? Because women can multitask much better than men, and men can just do nothing. And these are statistics, if I remember correctly. By doing nothing, it increases testosterone. Let's figure that one out. I don't know. But I'm engaged in devotional service, so I guess my doing nothing is chanting japa, because I don't relate to just sitting and doing nothing that much. But apparently that's what men need to do in general. So these are statistics. So it's also good for women to understand that, and men to understand something about women. Otherwise, it doesn't have to make sense to you. You just have to understand it makes sense to them. It works for them, even if it doesn't work for you. And you're talking about your problems, right? Oh, this happened today and that happened today. And the husband's like, well, why didn't you tell him this? And the husband, because men are in solution mode. That's how they were built. They're always built to find solutions. And the wife tells the husband, no, I just want you to listen. And the husband's thinking, well, why would you want me to listen and not talk? Because I could solve the problems. It's a different, no, if I just talk about it, the problem will go away. And he's like, how will the problem go away talking about it? You have to actually solve it. No, I don't have to solve it, I just have to talk about it. It doesn't, men and women think differently. It doesn't, so you just have to say, and this is so hard to do, you have to acknowledge that this makes sense for another person and it makes no sense for you. But understanding it makes sense, then the man says, okay, I'll just listen. Yeah, if you can just listen and go, wow, and empathize. Well, that must have been really hard, really bad, And the man's thinking, that happened to me, I would have punched him in the face. But you can't say that. He says, wow, that must have been really hard, yeah. I've been through those situations. I know what you're going through. And she's like, thank you for listening, I feel better. And he's like, okay, if that works, then it works. So that's your service, That's what I mean, the nuclear family. You probably wouldn't have had to do that 100 years ago. And so you have to learn how to do it. And in studies in empathic listening, they say generally women, it's more natural, but men can learn it and be just as good. So it's I don't know, I think it's hard to be a man and married in 2019 because things are just weird out there. There's so many, your wife's at work all day, you're at work all day, kids don't see you all day, you both come home exhausted, nothing to eat, kids are hungry, it's like, people used to live on farm and, that was the backyard was their office and the wife did, she was just there growing vegetables and kids were helping. Isn't it totally different now, right? Yeah. Criticism, and then, so if you're being criticized, then always remember there's a need. So if you're being criticized, you can stop and say, okay, what do you need? What do you need from me? What's going on? Or try to understand what's going on. So you say, oh, yeah. So you can address it. You say, maybe you understand it. Oh, you need me to be here more. That's why you're upset. There's a funny video on YouTube where this guy is going out. Oh, he wants to go out. It's Saturday. Gets a call from his friend. And he was sitting and talking with his wife, and his friend calls and says, you want to go out and play golf? And he asked his wife, is it okay if I go out and play golf? She goes, yeah, sure, go, do whatever you want. But actually she meant, don't go. So it takes time to understand. It's like, well, why would you say it's okay if you don't want me to go? Well, I don't want to upset you. Well, you just upset me because you didn't tell me what you wanted. So women may not always say exactly what they mean, and you have to interpret. You have to be sensitive to it. And so it's like It's like this workshop is very good because this workshop has caused some men to remain brahmacharis because they just think, I can't do this. I'll never be able to do this, I thought I wanted to get married, but if this is what I have to do, I think I'm just, quit my IT job and move in the temple because I could never do this. And I don't need all this money. It's true. It's definitely true. And therefore, unmarried men need to hear all this because they need to know what they have to do and say, can you actually do this? Can you interpret? Can you feel? Because in the nuclear family, it's all on you. You need all these skills that you didn't perhaps need 100 years ago. So, yeah. So, taking criticism, understanding. People are upset. They're trying to pacify themselves when they criticize. It's like getting rid of this aggression. So what's going on? Why are they frustrated? What's there? And then, what can I do to help you? How can I, Or just listen. And just listen and you'll start to understand. And then at a later date, when you have your meeting, you can say, last week when you did this, I really felt disrespected. Is there a way you could do it, more respectfully? Something like that. Just talk about it. Okay. So, you've been sitting for an hour and a half. Should we take a break? Or should we continue? Or you want to stand up for a minute? Yeah? Want to stand up? Everyone stand up. Stretch. Move around. You can all stand up also. Okay, so I want to see how many of you can touch the floor with your hands, but you can't bend your knees. So you can't go cheat like this. You have to go like this. So how many of you can do that? At least touch your toes and see if you can get further with your hands. How far you can go. Wow, look at this guy. He's like 8 years old. That's good. You practice or you just like that?
I don't practice.
Oh, wow. All right, how many could touch your toes?
They don't have dummies.
Oh.
I don't have.
Okay. So we do a little exercise. We'll go down and then we'll come back up. And we'll chant Radhe Shyam. It goes like this. You can follow me. Jai Sri Radhe Shyam. And then when you go down a little further, and you come up, go back a little further with your shoulders. Not like this, but like that. Okay? And chant a little louder. Go down. Jai Sri Radhe Shyam. One more time, a little louder. Jai Sri Radhe Shyam. All right. Can we make it another hour and a half? Or if you want, you can stand up. You can stand up. You can sit in a chair, whatever you need. We're going to go to the next one now. And there's a bathroom right here. Toilet.
Yes, this one.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Bathroom. And we have water or anything? Right.
We have.
You get some water, walk around, be right back, don't leave. If you have any questions out there, you can ask now, because we're taking a break. I've had this ginger tea.
Like you said that, and it is true that men, they don't understand. We have to tell them, what the problem is. They can't, they don't understand, like by reading the face or what's going on.
Yeah.
So
Generally not.
Is it their nature, or we have to accept this, or?
Well, it's could be nature as a male. It could be nature of the individual. the fact that the men and women are different in many ways. So, another woman will understand easily, but a man may not. Some men will. Depends on the nature. So, if you see that they're misunderstanding, of course, and say, no, that's not what I meant. When I say this, I mean this. Explain, This is how we as women see things or interpret things or express things. The thing is, if you have a really good relationship, and you've been married a long time, you don't even have to say it. They'll understand it. They'll just know. They'll just look at your face and go, what's wrong? And you'll start thinking, okay, what did I do? Sometimes it's not you did anything. It's just circumstances, Thank you. So, does anyone have any other questions about the first one? Yes?
So when we were talking about examples and that emotional part, like women are naturally more emotional and men are more practical. So when that part is not understood, then I feel other problems start. So how to balance that emotional and practical thing?
Balance, what do you mean by balance? Between the man and the woman?
Any relationship, if one person
Are you talking about
emotional,
from your perspective, the man understanding you, or you understanding the man, or both? Want to give an example of a problem in relation to that?
suppose there may not be any problem. It's just that if I take my example, I'm feeling emotional and I feel that my husband should understand, but he's more practical. So in that situation, how to
communicate that to him?
Yeah.
There may be articles or books or videos that could probably explain it better than you could, of how women process the world and how men could better understand it. So you could ask them and say, I think this would help. I think this would help if you read this, because it would help you better understand. And another important point for women, well, the important point for men to understand is that a lot of times a man might think, well, it's just my wife is like that. My wife is very emotional, or my wife is very this or that. When it may be true to a slight degree, but in general all women are more or less the same. One may be a little more emotional, one may be a little less emotional, but generally the same. So I think that's good for men to know. Otherwise, my wife is like this. No, your wife isn't like that. All women are like that. There was one brahmachari. He joined when he was he must have been 35 years old. And I once asked, he said, I had lots of girlfriends. I said, how many? He said, 25. And I said, were they all the same? I said, what were they like? And he said, all the same. In other words, female nature is the same. Obviously, how could 25 different women be all the same? He meant the nature is the same. So it's good for men to understand that it's a basic nature. And it's good for you to understand men have that basic nature, that you can be more emotionally controlled and they can be more empathetic, but they have to learn that. And that creates, it's the same thing. Whatever helps the relationship, we have to do it. That's what it's about. So you've heard of emotional intelligence, and emotional intelligence is just helping us better control the emotions that we're feeling. So if I'm feeling angry, I don't attack somebody I love. I control it. I get better at it. Or eventually I get better at, like we said yesterday, lesson 2, better not feeling angry in the first place. Or if at certain times of the month I get very emotional, I just explain that to my husband that this time of the month I'm probably going to say something I don't really mean, or be erratic or whatever. If that's your case, I don't know if it is, but I've seen some women are like that. They say during that time of the month, they just don't listen to what I say because I don't mean it. If that's the case, a man doesn't have that experience. A man is the same. they have this joke on the internet, and they show the emotions of a man and emotions of a woman during the day. So it uses emojis, and it has 45 emojis for women, and it has 2 for men. It's like, or 2 or 3, waking up, and then 1 emotion, and then going to sleep. So sometimes we have to communicate, and sometimes we just have to learn, take it on our own to learn and study. Well, why are men like this, or why are women like this? And in the effort to create a more respectful relationship, in the effort to create a more positive environment. And it's not only for you, it's for the kids, because if the kids grow up in a positive environment, they're going to be very, very emotionally mature, and they'll make good parents. But if you're always attacking your husband, or he's always aloof, your sons are going to copy him, your daughters will copy you, and do the same thing. And you may be doing what your mother did. Your husband may be doing what his father did, but we want to make it better. And we want to learn how to make it better. And if we can remember this word, respect, then it entails doing so many things. Him learning about you, you're learning about him, why you do things, and maybe, there's things that bother my wife, and I don't understand why they bother her. Things bother me, she doesn't understand why they bother. But we have to respect it. Why does that bother you? That never bothered me. No, it bothers me. Okay, I don't have to know why. It just does, and out of respect, I don't put her in a situation where that will happen. So respect is key ingredient. And you will see that everything we discuss is just the reduction and minimization of respect, and being replaced by something negative, and those negative things destroy. And so if we understand these are the things that destroy marriage, we want to make sure we rid them of our marriages. Sarcasm, that's an aspect of contempt. Making faces, you come home and you say to your husband, I just bought this, and he's like, that's disrespect. Whereas he says, let me see what you got. He's thinking in his mind, why is she always spending money and buying things? But he knows the best thing for the relationships. Let me see what you got. And you say, we just got these new curtains. And he goes, oh, those are gorgeous, they're beautiful. And he's thinking in his mind, the other ones are beautiful, and there's no holes in them. Why do we? And where are these curtains going? They're going in the garage with the last 6 years of curtains that we changed, and he's thinking this is stupid. But in order to maintain the relationship and the unity, he says, oh, these are beautiful, they're going to really look good, And then she's like, yeah, I got him at a good deal, and you like him? Yeah, I really like him, yeah. So then everything's good. But if you express, why are you wasting money? Because that's more of a practical reality, I wanted to buy this, and I wanted to buy a new phone, and you just spent $500 on curtains. Now I can't get the phone. You don't say it, because it's going to be destructive to the relationship. So better keep your old phone. Be happy looking at your newer curtains, although every time you look at them, you think iPhone 11 I could have had. You don't, because it's not good for the relationship, and it makes your wife happy. And if she's happy, you're happy, and everything's good. So that's how we have to think. Respect is always the most important thing. Even though on the practical level, something may not make sense. But if it in any way reduces the respect, you just don't go there, because it doesn't make sense in the long run. Now, you sit down at your weekly meeting and say, can we talk about budgeting? Before you spend more than $100 on something, could we discuss it? Because, I also have things that I'm saving to buy. And so we can see, what should go next. Then it solves that problem. So that's very, very important. And again, we're talking about we. It's the house, I want you to get the phone. You want me to get the curtains. We both want it, but we just want to see how we're going to do it. And say, well, maybe I could do this, I could work a little overtime, and then they'll pay me extra, And then you could get your phone. I go, oh, thank you. And then, so you work a little extra, or you know, whatever. Cater a wedding or something, make $500, and you just go, here, I want you, buy him the phone, here, I got, stuff like that. Otherwise, we're just fighting one another. And, you got this, and I didn't get that, and it doesn't work. Who wants to live like that? It's just complete hell. Another thing I'm surprised nobody brought up, why do we criticize? Because we want someone to change. We don't like their behavior, so we're criticizing behavior we don't like, which doesn't cause anyone to change, because it causes them to get mad, right? So, no one likes it when someone tries to change them, right? It's just a very unpleasant feeling, especially in an area where it's difficult or impossible for you to change. So we have to learn to be more accepting of the nature of our spouses. Now, if what they're doing upsets us to a degree that it's difficult for us, yes, we're going to talk about it. But we still have to accept, like your husband has to accept, you like to buy curtains every 3 years or whatever. So that's your nature. You just like, you're very aesthetic, and you get bored with things, looking at something for more than a couple of years. So he understands that now, and he's like, to him it's stupid. It's just a waste of money. He could buy look, if you didn't buy the curtains, I could have bought a TV that was like, 9 feet instead of 6 feet. That's how he thinks, So, but still, he accepts, well, that's your nature. And once he accepts that that's your nature, it's very easy for him to work around things, because he no longer has to put you down or try to change you, because he's just accepted, well, this is what she's like. This is how she grew up. That's what they did in their house. Every 3 years, everything changed. Painted the walls a different color, new curtains, the old furniture out, everything's perfectly good, and everything got changed. Okay. So now he accepts that. It's just going to happen, He's got it marked on his calendar. In 2022, we're going to have new furniture and new curtains. It's like, whatever, it's like, we're going to be $3,000 poorer, but he's making $100,000 a year, you're making $100,000. What is $3,000? It's nothing. Is that worth you getting a divorce over? It's more expensive to get a divorce than let you buy your new furniture, right? So that's respect. Accepting you as you are. And once you accept your spouse as they are, in areas that actually doesn't matter that they're like that, they're a little late, it doesn't matter, it's not like you're going to see the White House or something, you have to be on time, and you're going to a television show. So it's just, okay. My wife says 7, I know it means 7:15, I've just adjusted, So it's like, how come you're not getting ready? I said, we're leaving at 7. Oh, because it's only 7, and you won't be ready until 7:15. I'll get ready at 7:10. Only takes me 5 minutes, So he's adjusted to it. He's just made peace with it. This is how it is. And if she changes, and he can, in the meeting, he can say, it would really be nice if you could, when you say 7, you mean 7, is that possible? So it's like, okay, I'll try, out of, respect for you, and maybe she will, maybe she won't. But accepting is very important in a relationship, because you are a certain way, in certain areas your husband is, and it's not going to change. I have special Shakti, I don't know where I got it, to make a mess when I eat, to get my... So we joke I should have a plastic quarto when I eat, And, my wife sees it, I don't like when she's like, you're such a Brahmin, and when you eat, you're like a little kid. I go, I don't know why, I just not always, sometimes. And she just laughs at it, just accepts it, And she's like super clean and tidy and, everything, no crumb anywhere. And so, but, we accept one another because we like one another. So why should we allow little stupid things around the relationship to disturb that? It's not that important, right? What the relationship is strong, and why do you want to weaken it for something stupid that doesn't really matter, You can just, laugh a little bit at it. Sometimes my daughter and I would joke. If we know my wife is going to do something, we'd have a little joke about it. So let's laugh instead of argue. You know, my husband said he's coming home at 7. You know, and then the kids have a joke. Yeah, right. 7 means 7:30. You know, and they're all laughing. And he comes in at 7:30, and everybody laughs. They go, "Why are you laughing?" "Oh, you don't have to worry." You know. So rather than get upset, you can just laugh. Yes.
This I noticed in some devotees' family, specifically like if a spouse, one or any one of them is not a devotee and they are trying to become a devotee, so the one of the person is getting upset because they are trying to bring their child in Krishna consciousness and the husband is not supporting or the wife is not supporting. So
How to deal with it?
Upset. So
How to deal with it?
yeah.
Well, I understand the question, but my question back to the person was, when you got married, she became a devotee and he didn't, or she married him when he was?
Both of them joined in the same time, but the wife becomes a devotee.
Oh, yeah. Then it's, you got to talk about it. You have to.
Because of that, it is now they got separated.
Yeah. That is the most difficult thing, when one becomes a devotee and one doesn't, or one becomes more of a devotee and one doesn't. That makes it difficult for the person who's not a devotee, and difficult for the person who is a devotee. And it requires an extreme amount of empathy on both sides, otherwise, and respect and compromise. Otherwise, it's going to be difficult. And I think if you married someone who's not a devotee, then you would probably be more prepared for this. So you would have talked about it. But it's more difficult because you didn't know this was going to happen when you got married. But every marriage challenge requires maturity, and couples who have learned how to deal properly with one another can get through most anything because of that respect and that willingness to understand and compromise. And they're just willing to do what works for the relationship. And if you're willing to do what works for the relationship, you'll be successful. A lot of times, the relationship isn't good, and one of the partners cares, and the other partner doesn't care. And because the other partner doesn't care, there's not much that can be done. You can do your part and hope the other partner changes, and sometimes they will, but sometimes they won't. And if they don't, then it definitely makes it tough. And all you can do is talk about it.
So from their point of view, their question is like, so in this condition, like how we have to be together or to be separated is better.
What's better is to learn how to get along better and stay together. Their options they're missing one option. It's just like, stay together and be miserable, separate and be peaceful. What about third option? Stay together and make it work. Why wasn't that one option? Because they gave up on that option because they didn't know how. Again, remember, the most successful couples are not the most compatible, and they disagree on most things, but they've learned enough about relationships to get along. Any good marriage that's lasted 20, 30, 40 years, if you notice the people, you'll see a sufficient degree of respect. It has to be. Yes?
How do we deal with teasing in a relationship? When is it appropriate?
It's appropriate whenever you like it, and inappropriate whenever you don't like it. Let me read something. So this is number 2. We're talking about 4 things that destroy a marriage, and this is the primary thing that destroys it. This is pretty much the predictor that it won't last. And this is contempt. When we communicate in this state, we are truly mean. We treat others with disrespect, mock them with sarcasm, ridicule, call them names, and mimic or use body language such as eye-rolling or scrolling. The target of contempt is made to feel despised and worthless. So this has elevated criticism to basically attack, but it's subtle because it could be sarcastic, or it could just be making a face. So when you ask about teasing, and it depends, boys like to tease girls. That's how, when you're in school, if a boy's teasing you, that means he likes you. That's just some weird way boys show that they like you. So your husband teases you, it's because he likes you, but you don't like to be teased. So you say, I know you tease me because you like me, but I don't like it. And just have to tell him. Contempt goes far beyond criticism. While criticism attacks your partner's character, contempt assumes a position of moral superiority over them. So you're criticizing and say, yeah, you're stupid because you do this. But this is like, I'm up here and I'm just pushing you down. Like, I'm way better than you. So we want to be careful. Maybe some of us have a nature where we make faces or we're sarcastic and like that. So you have to be very careful because it's damaging. You're such an idiot. That's contempt. You're calling them names. You're so stupid. I can't believe I married you. What a mistake I made. Things like that. That's obviously it's on the way out at that point, or it's already finished. You just haven't gone to the lawyers yet. But So here's an example they give. This is husband comes home and he just plots down on the couch. He's tired. You're tired? Cry me a river. I've been with the kids all day running around mad to keep this house going. And all you do when you come home from work is flop down on that sofa like a child and play those idiotic video games. I don't have time to deal with another kid. Could you be any more pathetic? So you see the position she's taking. You're just like, she's like the mother and he's like the kid now. So what husband wants to feel like a kid? Raise your hand, husbands, if you want to feel like a kid. Yeah. Have your wife treat you this way? Yeah, it doesn't work. Research, this is so interesting. Research even shows that couples that are contemptuous of each other are more likely to suffer from infectious illness, colds, flu, etc., than others due to a weakened immune system. They found that happily married couples live longer. It actually builds the immune system. And this is wearing it down. Isn't that interesting? Contempt is fueled by long, simmering, negative thoughts about the partner, which come to a head when the perpetrator attacks the accused from a position of relative superiority. Most importantly, contempt is the single greatest predictor of divorce. So you want to rate yourself? On a scale of 1 to 10? 10 means you're very contemptuous, 1 means you're not. And if you are, why? What's causing it? This is just for you, so it's for your own analysis. So just, it's not, you don't have, I'm not going to read it, so you don't have to give yourself a higher score, because I'm going to read it. This is for you to know, if you need to work on it. I would say one cause of contempt is, and criticism also, is just being dissatisfied in your own life. And everything bothers you. And your spouse ends up bothering you the most because you're around them the most. So you can attack them more than others. So that's, if we're sarcastic and feel ourselves superior, that's it's not saying much for us, for our Krishna consciousness, is it? Yes.
On the other way, so when people think deeper is like in the relationship. And
When people think,
when people think depressed, kind of, and they think like, okay, I'm not a good match, so I want to end my life. Kind of, so.
depression. So in this example, let's say you're married and your wife became suicidal. Is that what you're saying?
What about a man becomes like that?
What about a man becomes like that? Yeah. Before marriage or after marriage? Oh. Because he's married, he becomes suicidal? Is that what you're saying? Just because he's married, or because he married this particular woman?
He married a particular woman who liked the most previously. Like,
I don't know, it's such a specific situation. And it's difficult to answer it in general. But
when she said, like, as you said, so I did a big mistake marrying you.
oh yeah, right. Okay, what to do when your wife says, I made a big mistake marrying you? If that's the case, probably she doesn't want to do anything to make the marriage better. The first attempt is always to do something, counseling or go to a workshop or do something to try to improve, talk about it. That's number one. But if she's dead set against you and thinks, you're useless, yeah, then maybe it's time to move on. And just, what can you do? To stay in that kind of toxic relationship will be very unhealthy for both of you. And maybe she shouldn't have been married. Or maybe you shouldn't have been married. And you're both discovering it now. It's unfortunate. So, generally, we don't recommend divorce. Unless it becomes a huge obstacle to your spiritual life or just to your material sanity. It's always a last resort. You always want to try to stay together, that's for sure. A little easier if you don't have kids. But it really takes two people. Like in the counseling my wife does, she'll never do marriage counseling for one person. It has to be both, because she's teaching them techniques that they both have to do. Because there's a synergy there, and if one doesn't, the other doesn't work. So my wife's a marriage counselor with this company, and they have a whole course of actions and exercises you go through, and it's successful in preventing divorce. Like, very successful. Most of the times you can save it. Because it's time tested, and you're learning these skills and learning to avoid the things that are harmful, and it turns marriages around. In some cases, people are too emotionally or psychologically ill to actually have a good relationship, healthy relationship. And if you came to know that, then it wouldn't be worth putting the energy in. So that's something to consider. So, specific situation, I don't know. Prabhupada did sometimes allow couples to separate when he saw there was no future, but he didn't want them to remarry, but many did remarry because they were young and they found it difficult to remain single, and he allowed it. It wasn't that he wanted it, but ultimately he let them decide. So these are all things to consider. Again, if we go back to the idea of what would we want to be to our spouse, what kind of person would we want to be, then it's obvious that being contemptuous is probably the worst thing we could be. And if we have that nature to feel that I'm right or command and control, etc., we have to work on that, because it's not going to work. Even if you're a CEO and you have that nature, it's not going to work. You have to work on it. The best leaders, if you have a boss who's condemning, you're going to leave. You're not going to stay with that company. So this is not just husband and wife. This is universal. Right? Yes?
So if in a relationship one person has low self-esteem,
Yes.
person thinks that it's just happening because of me, and when other person wants to talk, but they think they always take it personal. So how to deal with that situation?
You're probably going to need to learn more about low self-esteem to be able to help them and understand where it came from in their particular case, what triggers it, how to better communicate. But in general, showing a lot of respect and affection is very helpful. Because people with low self-esteem may have not been respected, or may have been highly disrespected, may have been cheated, may have been abused, or they may have been born that way. And nobody did it to them. But it's good to understand it so that you can help them. Any problem your spouse has, if you understand it, you can learn how to deal with it better. That's important. So, let's say your husband was in the military and he's got PTSD. You probably want to learn what PTSD is so you can help him, right? Some people have PTSD just from working in some crazy company, and they're a little weird after, they've been abused there or something, and it affects relationships. So anything like that that's happening, the spouse would do best to understand it so that you can help and also know how to respond. Otherwise, you're going to get upset, right? But if you understand why they're acting that way, then it's easier. Okay. They have prescriptions of how to deal with each of these. So once we finish these, then we'll read simple things you can do. So the third one is defensiveness. Defensiveness is typically a response to criticism. And all defensiveness means is you're not willing to admit that you've done something wrong. And you're trying to defend yourself that you're actually innocent. So they give an example here. Well, let me just read it. So, we've all been defensive, and this horseman is nearly omnipresent when relationships are on the rocks. You understand? Relationship on the rocks? You know what that means? It's an American expression. Can you explain it to them?
On the rocks is like when things are difficult and like on the verge of
crashing?
Yeah.
Destroying, crashing or destroying. How's your relationship? It's on the rocks. It means it's about finished. Or it's very difficult. Your job is on the rocks, you're about to get fired. Like that. When we feel unjustly accused, we fish for excuses and play the innocent victim so that our partner will back off. So we're just trying, we're being criticized and we want to push them away. So I don't know if you've ever said this when being criticized. Well, you do it also. It's like two wrongs are supposed to make a right. Why did you come home late? Well, you come home late too. But that's the kind of thing you hear from a child, isn't it? Unfortunately, this strategy is almost never successful. Our excuses just tell our partner that we don't take their concerns seriously and that we won't take responsibility for our mistakes. You did this. So now you're defending yourself, which sends the message what? I don't want to listen to you. Right? Like, I'm trying to tell you you were late and it caused a problem, and I can't tell you because you're defending yourself. So I've gotten nowhere, and it's very frustrating. Have you ever been in that situation? Especially where something's important, you need to communicate, and you can't because they're defensive, they take it personally. People with low self-esteem will tend to do this. Because when you criticize, they feel their very core sense as to the core is who they are is being attacked. So they have to defend it. because they already feel so low, and if they feel if I don't defend myself, then I'm nothing. I'm completely destroyed. So they'll try to defend themselves in order to maintain some level of self-esteem, because they have so little. Whereas people with high self-esteem, it's no problem. Oh yeah, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. It's very easy to do, and that's one of the ways you can spot low self-esteem or no low self-esteem. Low self-esteem or high self-esteem. Persons who have high self-esteem, it's very easy for them to admit mistakes. Oh, you did this. Oh yeah, I'm sorry, that was stupid. People with low self-esteem will have a harder time. Also, people with big false egos will have a harder time. So if you ever have a hard time admitting a mistake, or you see someone else having a hard time admitting a mistake, it could be just if they have low self-esteem, it's impossible. And that's not good for a relationship. Because if you did make a mistake, you need to admit it. Or laugh at it or something. That's also a symptom of being humble, that you have enough strength to admit a mistake. And otherwise your ego is so big you have to pretend you're something you're not, even in spite of the fact that people see you're not what you're pretending to be. And in a relationship, why pretend? Because your partner knows you. They know all your faults, so it's kind of stupid to pretend. And so this is a very immature response to a problem. And it breaks down communication, and it frustrates your partner. So, here's an example. Did you call Betty and Ralph to let them know we're not coming tonight as you promised this morning? So this is the defensive response. I was just too darn busy. As a matter of fact, you know just how busy my schedule was. Why didn't you just do it? So the spouse got blamed for something they weren't supposed to do. And the person who was supposed to do it blamed them for doing what they weren't supposed to do. The partner not only responds defensively, but they reverse blame in an attempt to make it the other partner's fault. Instead, a non-defensive response can express acceptance of responsibility, admission of fault, and understanding of your partner's perspective. So, here's the proper response. Oops, I forgot. You understand oops? You have a Hindi word for oops? What? What's the Hindi word? Oh? Oh, okay. Oh, I forgot. That's it? Oh, I forgot. I should have asked you this morning to do it because I knew my day would be packed. That's my fault. Let me call them right now. So, I observed with Prabhupada when a devotee made a mistake, Prabhupada wanted him to admit it and then do something to rectify it. And once they did, it was over. The Prabhupada was like, it was finished, it's like it never happened. It was rectified. So that's a responsible way to deal with it. Oh, so that's what he's doing here. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. I should have let you know. Okay, let me call them now. So it's always that resolution that really helps. Okay, what can we do? What can we do now? So just to say, I'm sorry, I blew it, it's my fault, I'll do something. This is like, it's so good. It's just like, okay, now I'm relieved. At least you're going to call them, you know. Although it's perfectly understandable to defend yourself if you're stressed out and feeling attacked, this approach will not have the desired effect. Defensiveness will only escalate the conflict if the critical spouse does not back down or apologize. This is because defensiveness is really a way of blaming your partner, and it won't allow for healthy conflict management. Make sense? And the last one. You have any questions on this?
So,
or you want to grade yourself on defensiveness?
Yeah, question. So, when a defensive argument comes into picture and if the opposite partner doesn't react to that one.
So let's say I criticize you and you defend, but it doesn't bother me. Then are you saying, is it okay if it doesn't bother you?
No. My thing is, so if I am defending, if I am criticizing and then if the defensive doesn't work and then keeping mum.
Oh yeah, that's the next one. Stonewalling. Stonewalling means you just don't do anything. You just turn off, zone out, merge in Brahman. You merge in Brahman while you're totally not there. You're not present. It's like, your body's there, but that's about it. I saw this video this morning, and they showed an example of stonewalling, and the man was talking to his wife, and I swear this is what his wife was like. She's like this, and it was a video, but she didn't move. She was like this. Like, I don't want to hear this. I don't want to talk about it. She was like a statue with this no expression on her face other than just boredom and disgust and off in another universe. Not wanting, the expression on her face was, this is the last place I want to be right now, is listening to you.
This is the place to open up man. I'm telling this is the best weapon of man.
Yeah, exactly.
Being still.
we discussed that before you came. This happens. Stonewalling is done by men, 85% of the. When you male female, it's only done by women 15% of the time. By men, 80. Not 50% of. 15% of women stonewall, 85% of men stonewall. If you want to get your husband to stonewall, just say these words: "We have to talk." Now, guys, what I would suggest to you, if you want to upgrade your relationship, as soon as she says, we have to talk, just say, sure, whenever, let me know, I'm ready. And I'll tell you why. And although you dread it, it's a lot worse if you don't talk. It's like a tooth, that's infected. Just go to the dentist and get it pulled. It only hurts for a second, but when you talk, the beauty of talking is you solve the problem. When you don't talk, the problem just gets swept under the rug, and you pretend it's not there, but it's definitely there for her, and it's affecting the relationship. So it's really, really the worst thing you can do is not talk about it, because it doesn't go away by not talking about it. And it continues to be a problem in the relationship. They have this, I think I may have mentioned this to you, they have this argumentative technique which they call the dirty dishes. And the dirty dishes is that you're arguing about one thing, but there's so many unresolved things that all of a sudden she goes to the dirty dishes and goes, that cup and that spoon and that, all these things that happened for the last year. And they go, wait a minute, we were just talking about the fact that I've been late coming home this week, So that's why the dirty dishes are there, because whenever she said, can we talk, you said later, and later never happened. So there's more dirty dishes. And it's degrading the relationship. So it may be uncomfortable, but the beauty of it is you resolve the problem by talking about it. So would you rather have a resolved problem and a few seconds of pain, or an unresolved problem and years of trouble? It doesn't make sense. So let's read about stonewalling. And there's some interesting things about why men stonewall and what you can do. The fourth horseman is stonewalling, which is usually a response to contempt. Stonewalling occurs when the listener withdraws from the interaction, shuts down, and simply stops responding to their partner. Rather than confronting the issues with their partner, people who stonewall can make evasive maneuvers such as tuning out, turning away, acting busy, or engaging in obsessive or distracting behaviors. Like you're talking to them and they're just like doing something else. That's pretty frustrating, isn't it? It takes time for the negativity created by the first three horsemen to become overwhelming enough that stonewalling becomes an understandable out. But when it does, it frequently becomes a bad habit, and unfortunately stonewalling isn't easy to stop. It is a result of feeling psychologically flooded, and when we stonewall, we may not even be in a physiological state where we can discuss things rationally. In other words, let's say you say something to your spouse that's extremely disturbing, and their heartbeat goes over 100 beats per minute. This is just pure science. They can't rationally talk anymore about it, and they just shut down. I was just like, you ever get so upset you just can't talk about it? That's often why stonewalling happens. You're just so upset. You know if you talk about it, you're not going to make any sense. You're just going to get angry. It's not going to be productive. And so what the founder of this company said, he said, a lot of men think, I'm just better shut up right now because I'm in trouble. And anything I say is going to make it worse. So you see, the couple doesn't have good communication skills because he's now afraid of his wife. So he thinks, and she'll calm down in 10 minutes and we won't have to talk about it. That's what he's thinking. So it's a tactic to get out of having to talk. And what she said upset him so much that he's in a point where he can't even talk about it, not rationally. And so what they suggest is that when what they call this being flooded, when you come to this point where you're so upset, just say, I can't talk about this now, can we come back in like 20 minutes? And it's just like, go calm down. And then come back, and when you're calm, you can talk about it. Don't talk about it when you're disturbed, or talk about it the next day. But whenever you feel like it's just, you hit this point, like, I can't talk about this right now. You know, for whatever reason, the topic is sensitive.
So better to be a stonewalling rather than arguing.
Better stonewall than argue?
Yeah.
No. There's productive arguing and unproductive arguing. So what they found is that arguing is healthy if you know how to do it in the right way. But just anger, tamasic stuff, yeah, they're both bad. I don't know which one's worse. Maybe fighting is worse. But that's what I was saying. I was saying you have to have the tools to be able to navigate the relationship. And one of the tools is how to fight in a productive way. Which is basically, you're just disagreeing, and you're talking about the disagreement. But you have the tools to be able to do that effectively. You know, getting angry is like, you know, losing your temper is like the worst thing for a relationship. Yes?
So for a healthy argument, both the partners should need to be mature enough. So if one is like very much irrational, then how could you argue?
They could
be turned to unproductive argument.
They could be irrational for a couple of reasons. Because they just got flooded, because the topic is so difficult for them. Like, let's say maybe your spouse had a relationship with another guy, and now you want to talk about it, and it's like really hard for her to talk about. It's just a tough subject. And maybe you need to like talk about it in a few months, because it's too sensitive. And she's just, you know, or maybe you presented it in the wrong way, or maybe you presented it at the wrong time. Like, sometimes you don't want to present it when it happens. You want to present it a week later. You know, remember last week when that happened? This is how I was feeling. How could we avoid that? Or what could we do? So I would always start there. You know, what am I doing that's causing her to be upset talking about this? And can I do it better? Time, place, words, and so forth. You know, let's say, for example, this is true also in corporate environments. You want to create environments where people feel safe to be honest. So like, you know, you come home to your wife and tell her, you know, I had an affair, and you want her to just listen without, you know, just running out of the room or doing something horrible. You want to have, I mean, that's not easy, but you want to have a relationship where there's so much trust that you could say anything without being condemned. So she may get irrational or whatever because because you have always judged her whenever she was honest, so she just wants to close down and doesn't want to be honest. So when you judge or mistreat someone for being honest, you're causing them to close down, and it makes the relationship lack trust, and trust is the basis of a relationship. So that could be a reason. I don't know in your situation, but that's something to consider. This is one of the reasons people shut down. It's because whenever they're honest, they get condemned for it, and they're not understood. Okay, well, let's say your wife said I had an affair, and then your first thing you say is, what did I do? What am I not giving you that caused you, or what did I do anything to cause this? So you haven't blamed her. You're letting her talk, Maybe you didn't do anything, maybe you did, but you're letting her talk. How can I help you? What can I do? That's a mature response. Difficult. But when we create that precedent, then we can talk. And maybe that's why she's shutting down. Other reason could be, it just could be her nature. And at another point in time, you could express, I think it's really important that we talk, to talk about a relationship and things. And I know it's hard. How can we do it? How can I make it easier for you? But it's important for me. So you're not blaming her. You never want to blame, but say, for our relationship, we really need to do this, and how can we do it? That's the way you want to do it. And so whenever your partner's not responding, maybe it's her fault, but maybe there's what things you can do to make it easier. So you have to think about that. Yes?
If suppose if their spouses are arguing, or if he's criticizing, so by the time if I start speaking, so if he says that you have to stop, so I cannot hear you, if you speak I will get more angry, so better you stop, so I just finish whatever I want to say. So in that case I feel okay, better to be stonewalling. So instead of myself so much making him more angry, so I can be better to be stonewalling.
Well, not necessarily stonewall, just don't say anything. You can listen. You can just say, okay, let me think about it. And then I think you need to try to have these regular meetings, because I think it would avoid most of this. Because these things are building up, because they're not, it's like we never talked about this, and it's been building up for a long time, and that's why he's exploding. Whereas if you're talking about it and working on it, and how can I be better, how can you be better, then it's less likely to happen, because there's no reason for it to happen, because you're working on the issues. So the preventative is always better. Once you're in the situation like that, that's a sign that things are bad, and that we're not doing enough to prevent those situations. That's what I would say. Does that make sense? Like people say, well, what do you do when you get angry? And I often say it's too late. The question is, what do I do so I don't get angry? Not what do I do when I get angry. Well, when you're angry, anger is a drug. It's like it overtakes you. So often I say, nothing. You can count to 10 if you want, but you've already said all these horrible things that you're going to have to take back. So wouldn't it be better to learn strategies and understand yourself as to why you get angry, and learn how to let it go before you actually become angry? Yeah, it would be. I talked to two people a couple of weeks ago about anger issues, and both of them said, I didn't try to analyze my anger, I just let it go. I decided I don't want it. I said, how did you get rid of it? I said, I let it go. Amazing, right? Just let it go, detachment. So it's possible when you're ready to do it. So I would take your example as an indication that the problem is deeper than the thing you were talking about, and you need to get more to the core of that through regular discussion. That's my analysis. In a healthy relationship, you won't have those things. They won't build up, because you're practicing not to do these things. you're making deposits in the relationship, you're trying to understand, you're working together. And so if there's a problem, you won't be fighting and screaming, you'll just be talking. So we have to talk, you can, have an argument, whatever. Argue about where your kids are going to go to school, argue about whether you want to move back to India or not. But that's a different kind of argument. You need to argue about those things. You have different opinions, right? Argue about how much money we want to save or not save, or what we want to do with it. Right? It's really just a discussion over a disagreement. But you learn how to discuss it because you're mature. You want to open the window? Is it warm out now or what?
It's hot. It's hot today.
It's hot today. Okay, now everyone will wake up. Count of 3, wake up. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Okay, so I want to show you the antidotes. So this is important. So what do you do if you have a problem, and normally you would criticize, so how do you do it? They have a thing what they call soft startup. They say that the way you begin a conversation will determine the outcome. So if you start an attack, you've lost right in the beginning. It's going to have a bad outcome. If you express your own needs, and you express it gently, rather than attack the person, you're going to have a better chance of communicating. So when you come home late, I feel. You didn't blame them for coming home late. You're just expressing how I feel. The other night you came home late, I just wanted to share what I was feeling. I was worried and put me in a lot of anxiety, and my need is to know that you're safe, and if you could just call when you come home, that would really help. Instead of, attacking them for doing that. So this is known as an I message, not EYE, but I. You're saying, I need, not you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. So that's a way of speaking you'll have to practice. But it's much more effective in communicating. Right? So we can all go for a walk in the park today, huh? Chant Japa, it's so warm. Is it really warm out?
We have some cool air coming from
It's warm over here. And I'm never warm. What? It's not warm? It's not warm. It's not warm. Oh, okay. All right. So, any questions on that? I messages. Instead of attacking, always express what your need is. Yes?
Like you said, sort of the defensiveness, when it comes that if you, in any relationship, whether, if it's husband or the other person is just trying to be defensive and doesn't want to talk, and whenever you go want to talk and then they're being defensive, then you can just get really frustrated, and then sometimes you just want to end it, just don't want to carry on. So how to deal with that? Is there any way we can deal with it?
Yeah. You have to tell the person it's not working the way it's going. This relationship is not working. We're not doing well. We can do better. We need to talk about it. Or we need help. It's just some communication. See, when a man looks at a relationship and a woman looks at a relationship, they look at it from a different scoring system. And usually the woman scores about 3 points lower she'll evaluate the relationship, let's say at a 5, and he'll evaluate it at an 8. So he's like, why do we have to talk? Everything's fine. What's fine for him? Well, we haven't gotten any fights in the last few months, so that means it's good. You haven't done anything together, you haven't talked, but he thinks it's good because he went out and did whatever he wanted on the weekend and you never complained. So he's happy. But you're sitting there thinking, we don't do anything together, I have no relationship. So how does he know unless it's communicated? And so you have to communicate, this relationship is not going well, and oftentimes he'll be in shock. What do you mean it's not going well? We get along great, we never fight, this and that. And you're like, no, we never talk, we don't do anything together. You read the newspaper when we have dinner, He doesn't notice these things. He thinks everything's fine. I can't say every man's like that, but that's a generalization. It's often like that. So you may need to say, no, things are not going well with whatever, with the kids or with this or with that, your life or the relationship. We're going to need to talk about it. It's a problem for me. And you have to make him realize it's not a little problem. If it continues like this, it's going to be it's a big problem, and if it continues like this, it's going to be a disastrous problem. And then he'll understand, oh, I didn't realize, because he had given it a higher grade than you. I've always seen that, and then I heard a talk, and this person said the same thing. He's been teaching marriage workshops for forever, and he said, yeah, the men always think it's better than the women. Because if a man's just left alone, he thinks that's a good relationship. Isn't it? I could do whatever I want. She doesn't bother me. That's a good relationship. And a woman thinks the more they're together, the more they talk, that's a good relationship. Different natures. That's why he grades it higher. She leaves him alone, that's a good relationship. Right? For you, it's the other way? All right. Then maybe he's going to give a lower score. I don't know. We'll find out.
Like you said, for us that he talks more, by nature I am not very expressive. Mm-hmm. So that's the problem, He wants me to express, but I can't, and he's very expressive. So that's
yeah. All right, could be, yeah. So, you had a question?
So is a man needs personal space in his relationship?
Yeah, he does.
So
he
is
does.
a problem?
So it's not a problem. It's normal, but his wife needs to know, and he needs,
It's my duty to let my partner that I need this kind of space.
Yeah, for a certain amount of time. Yeah.
In my life.
Yeah, a certain day. On Saturday I just need a few hours to go, whatever. Yeah. And in a good relationship, the spouse will respect that, because you respect her space and her needs also. And you make it easy for her to respect your needs because you respect hers. You make it hard for her to respect yours if you don't respect hers. Like, let's say she gets no personal time, and you get all the personal time, then that's going to be hard. Right? Yeah. So I think the irony of marriage is you enter a marriage thinking you're going to get so much out of it, and as you're into it, you realize you're compromising all the time. You'll get out of it something, but you're going to have to compromise many things to get that something. And so, I don't think we enter it with a clear understanding of what it is, and that's one of the reasons we sometimes become frustrated, because we're sacrificing so much. And especially if the relationship is bad, then it's like, why am I sacrificing this? But if you have a good relationship, you understand why you're sacrificing. Because it's helping you in your spiritual life as well as your material life. Because if your relationship is disturbed, your Krishna consciousness is disturbed. Anything that's disturbing in your life disturbs your spiritual life to some degree, especially this. So, we really need to master this if we're going to do it. Yes? So the next one, contempt, so the antidote is to build a culture of appreciation, which would, just like thanking one another when they do things, for cooking, or thanking the husband for supporting the family, or, complimenting. So, noticing the good qualities, things like this. Just, it's like sometimes we talk about appreciation, but no, it's awkward to talk about it because we should just know that we should do it. So to have to talk about it is sad, isn't it? Because we should just be doing it. So culture of appreciation versus culture of disrespect. If there's respect, there'll naturally be appreciation. If there's disrespect, there's lack of it. And appreciation is, in my experience, appreciation is one of the most powerful emotions, relational emotions. And it dissolves so much animosity. And it dissolves the desire and need to criticize. It's uplifting, it's bonding, it's healing. So defensiveness, the simple antidote is take responsibility. Accept the accusation and take responsibility for correcting it. It's pretty simple. So simple that we can hardly do it, right? Because when we're accused, the ego naturally goes. So this is a challenge that we all have to, navigate. And I don't want to say it's easy, I just want to say it's necessary. Things which are necessary are not always easy, but it doesn't mean they're not necessary, because they're not easy. So, if your partner is saying you've done something wrong and you have, just accept it and correct it. What's the big thing? Big thing is the ego gets in the way. If you have this relationship where you're not judging one another, it's much easier to accept it because you won't feel judged. But if you're always judging your spouse, you make it harder for them to accept, because then they're having to admit guilt. And admitting guilt may come with consequences. You don't want the consequences, so you deny it. Whereas if admitting guilt doesn't come with consequences, it's just you have a very understanding relationship and you're not judgmental. It's just, this is how it is, and we just need to correct it, and that's all I'm saying. I'm not judging you. Then it's easier. All I want you to do is just, you bring, you leave your shoes outside because you bring dirt in. I just like, okay, what's the big deal? Okay, oh, I'm sorry, let me clean the dirt up. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. It's over. Otherwise, you can have this big argument, for 20 minutes. What's the point? How old are you? 28 or 8? So don't act like you're 8 if you want to have a good marriage, because it doesn't work. Yes?
So in the case of criticism, maybe not like, oh, you left your shoes, but like maybe some personal character comments or something. What is the best way to respond to this?
If you're being criticized? It's the same thing. Talk about it later. Just don't, probably just say, okay, you're absolutely right, and then talk about it later. You remember last week when I said you're absolutely right? I didn't mean that. I was hurt by it, and this is not good for our relationship. And this is one of the things that could destroy a relationship, and we really need to learn to develop a culture of respect. And if we're going to have children and bring them into this kind of culture, it's not going to be good, etc. Sometimes you can't win in the moment, but you can win later. And in this method, they have a book called The 7 Principles to Make Marriage Work, and they have a lot of exercises where you're doing a lot of talking about these things, and you're doing a lot of talking about understanding one another, and finding out about one another, and your likes, your dislikes. You're really supporting one another, which is like, why get married if you're not going to support one another? Why get married to tear somebody down and criticize? It doesn't make any sense, right? You're partially responsible for your spouse's spiritual advancement, so you want to do whatever you can to help them. And criticism is not going to help them. Unless they ask you, if I do something wrong, please tell me. All right, I'll tell you. And they'll appreciate it. That's different. And the last one, stonewalling. And the general remedy for stonewalling is just say, I can't talk right now, I'm overwhelmed. Just give me 20 minutes or a half hour to calm down, and then we'll come back. Or whatever, next day, whatever. Now, some more positive things you can do. So as I was saying, this is in their book, but you learn, they have exercises where you ask questions. What's your spouse's favorite color? What's their favorite food? What's their favorite music? And you see how much you understand about them. And you might be wrong, and that's okay. And then they tell you, no, I really like this. Oh, I thought you liked this. No, I do, but I like this. So you're getting to know one another. And even though it sounds simple, it really, really helps the relationship. And they ask questions like, what was your greatest challenge growing up? And you don't know all these things about your spouse, so you're just coming closer. Oh, when I was 13, I had to do this, and it was so hard for me, etc. And so you're just learning about one another. If you get the book, or maybe it's online, you can find. And then, it's all the things they're talking about is basically, whenever there's a conflict, don't run away from it, but go towards it and try to manage it, deal with it, talk about it. That's always the tactic. Always be supportive. If your spouse needs it, don't turn away from it. Always be turning towards it, don't avoid. Hold on. Yeah, they have this their basic paradigm, which is maybe you could say a little bit different than what is traditionally known in Krishna consciousness, but it's like everything you do, work it out together. Let your spouse influence you with their ideas. Be open to it. Think about it. So say, I feel this way. I think this way. I understand this way. Don't just go, no, that's wrong. Prabhupada never said that. Be open to it. Allow them to influence you with their ideas. Allow them to then take it on board and work together, rather than this, I'm right, you're wrong, you do what I say. So that's, that's a basic, there's so much we could say, but I think that's the basic idea, You're doing, as we said, you're doing everything together. It's not, this is what I want to do, and the other one just comes along. But your dreams are shared. So, I want to live in the country, she wants to live in the city. Okay, we'll live in the suburbs. Or we'll live on 5 acres, an hour from the city, and I can take a train into the city. Something like that. You're working things out together. It's not one side or the other. So, you're a team. But this one, this is how they say to manage conflict. In managing conflict, you have to listen to your partner's point of view and not fight it, but just digest it. This is what I want, this is what I need, this is how I think, these are my dreams, and you take it all on board. And then they share theirs, and then together, knowing both of your dreams, and you work something out rather than, no, this is how it's going to be. I don't care what you think, it's like this. That doesn't work. Is that okay? Do you have questions?
What was the name of the book again, please?
It's called Seven.
Principles to Make Marriage Work.
I think so. You want to hear the exercise, the questions, just for fun? Name 2 of my closest friends. What was I wearing when we first met? Name 1 of my hobbies. What stresses am I facing now? Describe in detail what I did yesterday or today. What's my fondest unrealized dream? What is one of my greatest fears or disaster scenarios? What's my favorite way to spend an evening? What is one of my favorite ways to be soothed? What is my favorite getaway place? What are some of the most important events coming up in my life? What are my favorite ways to work out? Who is my enemy? What's my ideal job? What am I worried about physically? What was my most embarrassing moment? And so you're just discussing. It's like, you can do this with anybody, just to get to know one another. We did an exercise like this in Mayapur once, just to get to know devotees we didn't know. And just something simple like this was, in 10 minutes we really knew the person. And we've seen the person 100 times. We never talked to them. So it was nice. So, yeah. What do you think? It's okay? So I just want to reiterate, you probably heard this phrase, the operation was a success and the patient died. So it's not about, following rules and principles to the T. It's about the relationship. And so this is really the essence of the way I see Grihastha life, that every decision we make, we have to ask ourselves, is it going to help the relationship or not? In the same way, in bhakti, we've been instructed that we should only do what's favorable to bhakti and we should avoid what's unfavorable. And I think this applies to Grihastha life. Do what's favorable, avoid what's unfavorable. And this is how you can make decisions. Otherwise, you make decisions based on principles, there you'll have a successful operation and a dead marriage. And you want to avoid that. So, I may be upset with my wife, but I have to ask myself, if I express this, is it going to help the relationship? And if it's not, I don't need to express it. I just need to process it myself and, work it out and learn to tolerate or accept, because this is how it is. And if I determine that's the best thing for the relationship, we don't even need to talk about it. There's no reason. We've talked about it before. This is just something we disagree on, or this is how she is. Then why bother? It's just going to make things worse. And if it can't make it better, and it can only make it worse, then don't go there. So if you use that as a guideline, it becomes much easier to do all these things, because you'll think, okay, what can I do in this situation to make it better, if anything? And what could I possibly do that would make it worse? And then, naturally, I don't want to do that. Simple, right? There's a couple principles I forgot. I want to just find this. I want to find one. Hold on a second. My wife knows this material better than I do. As part of his research, John Gottman conducted a study with newlyweds and then followed up upon them 6 years later. Many of the couples had remained together. Many had divorced. The couples that stayed married were much better at one thing. And they call this turn towards instead of away. At the 6-year follow-up, couples that had stayed married turned towards one another 86% of the time. Couples that had divorced averaged only 30%. So, turn towards means, like, let's say there's a difficulty, or like you're saying, just you don't want to talk about it, you just turn away, or go away, or avoid conflict, or she needs support, whatever. So this is how they see it. They call it bids. Like, let's say, like with children, you always know when children, when they want your attention, right? So in this language, they call it a bid. So it's a sign for attention. So you have to notice the bids. Like, your spouse says, we haven't talked in a while. And you go, I'm really busy, we talk about it later, No, but you see, if it's a bid, they're upset and they need to talk now, and you notice that. So you turn towards instead of away. If you say, can we do it later? You've just turned away, and you didn't notice that was really important to do it right there. So successful couples would see these bids, when someone says, could we talk, or could we spend a little time here, or could we do this together, whatever, you see it. Oh, okay, I can't turn away from this. And the ones who are divorced, they turned away, They want to talk about something, they don't want to talk about it. You want to do something, we haven't taken any vacations, we haven't gone out and spent time together, can we? I don't feel like it, I'm too busy. You just turned away from it. Does that make sense? Here, John Gottman's list of minor bids for emotional connection. Pay attention to what your spouse says. How do I look? Yeah, okay. Did you see that squirrel? No. Respond to simple requests. Could you take Pooch for a walk? Okay. While you're up, can you grab the salsa? You go, no, I'm too tired. It's like, can you do it? Then you think, what's the big thing? But like for a woman, if she's asking her husband to do something and he does it, it's salsa. That's 1 point. You only got 1 point for the Mercedes, you get 1 point for the salsa. You might as well do it. Right? Let's help Grandma outside. Do you like my drawing? How were the cookies? So-and-so's on the way. Can you give her our address? It's just, can we talk? Can I tell you what happened today on the way back? What have you been up to? Did you hear about? I've been cooking all day. I'm so tired. Yeah, me too. It's like there's a bid, it's like some sympathy. And you're thinking, well, she has no sympathy for me. It's like childish. Can you come over here? Can we talk? Or what? Can you want to do this or that? Can we go on a walk? Yeah, something like that. So maybe you don't like to walk, but you'll do it because you can see they just want to spend time with you, right? Turning towards means you have to pay attention. So, yeah. So you want to grade yourself on turning towards? What percentage of the time do you turn towards the bids, and what percentage do you turn away from the bids? Be honest. And I think we should end with analyzing how much is in your emotional bank account. Is it about ready to go in the red, or you're flush, it's overflowing, or where is it? And then just think about how you can increase that emotional bank account. And start working on it. So it's 5 to 2. I've done something I rarely have ever done before, is finish on time. I finished early. No, I've finished on time before, sometimes, but never early. I mean, I have a whole PowerPoint with like 100 and million slides, which I didn't want to go to because we don't have time. So I just wanted to present these things because I think these are essentially important. Okay?
Thank you.
Good. You're welcome.
One last question.
Okay.
Actually, if you see the marriage, finding match in India, mostly it is like based on caste and everything gotra and everything will be seen, and then all that that patrika and all that. If it's matched, then only they will get married. And but if you see, there are some examples like in that divorces happens in that also. But if you see ISKCON marriages also, there are some marriages in ISKCON, they find devotee girls and devotee, boys, and they get married. But there are examples also that, they also have a problems like, they will have divorces, there are no matching, even, they both are devotee. So
I have something I could read, which would explain. So I'm going to try, but we may lose all of you. And if we do, I'm sorry. Does anyone know if you can go to your notes and at the same time keep your Facebook broadcast? You can't?
I know, because the application is going to close. And it's all right.
The application is going to close. You're going to miss the best part of the whole thing.
There is multitasking.
What?
Multitasking available on that phone, you can do that.
You want to show me?
I'm not sure if it is available on your phone.
With the multi-screen option.
Yeah, multi-screen
option.
It's a Samsung S8.
It is.
Possible?
Samsung, but not S8. I don't have.
It's possible?
If it's multitasking.
What?
If it's multitasking, I say that yes.
What does multitasking mean? There's
like multiple
Where-
tasks at the same time.
Where would you find multitasking?
iPhone one? No, Samsung one. Or I can.
S8.
I can log in into your account with my phone.
To my but it's on my Samsung phone notes.
No, but I can make the transmission to your account.
If you can transmit on Facebook, then I can go to my phone.
Yes, I can transmit.
Because she's going to transmit, then I can go to my phone. Correct?
Well, then
So I have to get off for you to transmit, or it's just going to...
Let's see what happens if I enter at the same time.
She's going to try to transmit. Wow. Get two angles, huh?
But should I use your account?
Yeah.
No.
Okay. Let me 1 minute.
If we lose you all, just go back on, because what I'm going to read is really amazing. You may have heard it before, but I don't think you could hear it enough. And I think it'll answer your question. What does it say? I'd be shocked if she can get on at the same time I'm on. And then when I get off, she stays on.
Are you going to sing the Modestaka now?
No. Can I think I'll just exit.
I think we can do that. Samsung S8.
No, I cannot. So you got to turn off?
So how do I get it? They're going to show me how to multi. This would be like revolutionary now. Stay with us.
Just like this is also Samsung S8.
Mm-hmm.
So just minimize that.